Hello ladies and gentlemen, and welcome back to my channel for another Hot Toys 1/6 scale die-cast Iron Man figure unboxing and review. Today, we're taking a look at the Mark 6 2.0 with suit-up gantry. Technically based off Avengers 1, but you could fudge this into an Iron Man 2 display as well. Now I got mine at a discount from Pop Collectibles. As always, do your own research, make sure you are comfortable before buying. I have popped a link to their site in the description below, along with the discount code Justin's Collection, for 5% off your order if you do decide to buy from them. While you are down in the description, why not hit that subscribe, bell notification icon, and join button, so you're notified as soon as a brand new Hot Toys die-cast Iron Man figure review goes live on the channel. As for the box art, getting this entire thing in frame was non-trivial. This box is bloody massive. Up front, we've got an image of the figure itself, standing inside the suit-up gantry, a metallic foil Avengers logo, Stark Tower in the background, and his name down below. They've done the entire box in this satin finish, over the top of a metallic print, so when light bounces off the surface, this looks great. The Mark 6 is one of my favorite suits. That triangular arc reactor cannot be beaten. Around the back, we have an image of the figure itself once more, off to the right-hand side. Then on the left, warnings and legal info. I've got a feeling the figure isn't what's taking up most of the room inside the box, so let's open it up and find out. The way they've done this is actually really clever from a manufacturing perspective, because they literally just have to grab a standard Mark 6 2.0 diecast off the production line once it's done, slap it inside the box alongside the gantry, and that's it. They don't have to make a bunch of bespoke packaging, just a larger cardboard box and a clamshell for the gantry itself. We will look at this throughout the course of the video, but for right now, I want to focus on the Mark 6. That's better. This is a much more manageable size. Up top on the lid it says Mark 6 2.0. This is etched into the surface of the foam. Then we have the figure itself. The number one question I hope to answer throughout the course of the video is, was a 2.0 diecast Mark 6 necessary? And is there anything that the original does better than this new one? First in-hand impressions, loving the finish, and this guy, of course, being a die-cast figure, is quite heavy. What we're going to do now is get all of the Mark 6's accessories laid out in the light box and take a closer look at everything he comes with. Now, Hot Toys, we've spoken about this. If you are giving us an enormous diorama base, you also need to include the standard one. What makes this even worse is back in the day, they used to give us both bases. With the black suit Spidey from Spider-Man 3, X-Men 3 Wolverine, Christopher Reeve Superman, you get what I'm trying to say. They don't do it anymore, and that's a crime, because this figure is way more expensive than any of those other releases were. At least we do get the same battle damage pieces that we got with the 1.0. We will try these out on the suit when we get him out here. Say you have room right now for that diorama base, but eventually in the future you downsize and you still want to have Tony standing on a base? Well, you're shit out of luck, because Hot Toys cheaped out and they only gave you the one base. These translucent laser beam effects we've seen a ton of times before. They're still cast in the same clear plastic, tinted pink for the tips, and they're quite flexible, so I don't think you have to worry about breakage when you're plugging these into the laser projector hands. Ooh, a new Tony Stark sculpt. I can't wait to discuss this in more detail on the body. Just know that you do have to install this rubbery neck gasket piece on the sculpt before you plug it in. These are new for the 2.0. They're these Endoskeleton mesh armor pieces that can either be displayed on the suit or in the gantry arms when you have Tony displayed inside of it. Once again, just like anything that's more involved here, we will discuss these in more detail later. But very quickly, I wanted to be cheeky and discuss this opening helmet. This is my favorite accessory hands down. It can spring open, there are some hinges around the back, it's fully detailed and painted on the inside, but it's not meant to be worn on that head sculpt. This is more so just meant to slot into the gantry and hover behind his head sculpt when he's walking down the stairs. Stop me if you've seen this stuff before. We've got the interchangeable dart projector armor plates, they attach with magnets, and 4 interchangeable panels for each gauntlet, so 8 in total with different little mini weapons on them. These are from the reindeer game scene in Avengers 1. If you couldn't already tell, we're not discussing the gantry yet, that's why it's not here. I wanted to go through the Mark 6's accessories on their own first. He does come with a full array of hands, including these closed fists with the laser beam projectors popping out of the back hand armor, 2 repulsor blasting hands with translucent repulsors, and angled wrist peg ports and hand armor, so when you install these on the body, they're already sitting at the correct angle. Next up, my favorite of the bunch, some articulated finger hands, and yes, you could foreseeably get Tony to flip someone like Loki the bird in your collection if you wanted to. Oh, and 2 closed fists already installed on him out of the box. What we're going to do now is get the Mark 6 himself out here. Standing straight up and down in the light box, no crazy poses or accessories or anything like that. The Mark 6 has never looked so good. He is largely the same figure as the original diecast Mark 6, save for some new accessories, and a fresh paint job, and the Tony Stark head sculpt, and a monstrous new gantry. The mini gantry we got with the 1.0 is like a joke in comparison to this new one. Is this, though, the be-all, end-all Mark 6 in this scale? I hope so. Because yes, this thing looks slick in the new satin finish, but I don't know about y'all, I'm getting sick and tired of getting the same figure over and over and over again with subtle changes. That only works so many times, Hot Toys. I hope this is it for the Mark 6, for a while at least. Close and personal, kicking things off with his helmet. This looks, to me at least, like it's the exact same mold as the 1.0. I'm okay with that because I never really had an issue with the proportions of the original Mark 6 helmet. But the biggest difference this time is the finish. Now, instead of a super glossy hot rod red, it's still saturated, but it's a satin finish, so light bounces off the surface in a completely different way. It looks a lot more diffused and way more movie accurate. This is how I want all of my die-cast Iron Man figures to be painted. The gold saturation has been dialed down, and it's very shiny and metallic, but it's the red that gets me the most. The eyes are currently illuminated. Unfortunately, they did stick with button cell batteries, so that just isn't going to last very long. Oh boy, this is going to be one controversial Tony Stark head sculpt. And I understand why the smirk is not going to be for everyone. It certainly is for me. I reckon it's fitting for an early MCU Tony to be smirking like this. The biggest issue I have with it is he comes across maybe too old for Avengers 1 because he's got the baggy skin under his eyes and just way too much skin texture and the crow's feet and the wrinkling on his forehead. If they'd have dialed that stuff back, then this would have read as though it's RDJ from 2012 versus RDJ from 2024. At least it is well painted, and from most angles the likeness does come through. The goatee is perfect, it's a single piece sculpt, so the neck does extend down into the suit, no skin tone or skin texture mismatches, and the hair has so much detail in it. The best part about this sculpt is that it has moving eyes. I love when they do stuff like this. They've cleverly disguised the seam for the removable back hairpiece within the texture and jaggedness for the hair strands. So if you're not looking for it, it's probably not going to jump out at you right away. This is a hell of a lot better than a straight cut across the top of his head. Once you take off the back panel, it's held in place with magnets. You can then either use the included tool or your finger to move the eyes around. They are individually articulated, so if you do want to get goofy with it and have them looking off in different directions, you can totally go for it. This sculpt loves a bit of side-eye. Angles are this head's best friend, so work with them, move the eyes off to the side, and hunt for that likeness. If you don't like this head, and by all means weigh in down in the comments below if you hate it, you can always just go back to the helmet. Et voila, now he's back to normal. Don't forget to install the rubbery neck gasket piece at the base of the Tony Stark sculpt, because if you don't, then his neck is going to look extremely long when you install it on the body. Around the back, we can open up the flaps. They are fully detailed on the underside, including on these extending pieces. They're on multiple different hinges. And this is where they've hidden the battery compartment. Once again, just like the helmet, they have gone with button cell batteries to power this guy, so you are going to have to change them out pretty frequently if you want to have this guy lit up all the time in the display. Back around the front, we will switch out these panels, they're held on with magnets, and install the dart launchers. But before we do, you can flip open the trap armor plates, and underneath them we've got some teeny tiny painted little rockets. The shoulder pads are articulated and they're made of die cast, but when you collapse everything up and you have them situated correctly, the gap at the shoulders is virtually non-existent. Yes, you can see a bit of light passing through. In the display, from a distance, I highly doubt you're ever going to notice that. There is some hidden detail tucked underneath the shoulder pads and inside the armpit area. This stuff is mostly just always permanently obscured unless you're getting crazy with the posing and you extend the arms out. But they have painted all of that stuff in there, and there's a wash over the top, so yeah, I love to see it. The bicep armor painted in gunmetal with the weathering on the surface, all of this pitting is meant to be there, so don't freak out if this is your first Iron Man figure. And these panels on the gauntlets are interchangeable. We will get to that stuff, I promise. I think we can all agree that one of the best parts about the Mark VI is the triangular arc reactor. It's so specific and bespoke to this suit that he's now become instantly recognizable because of it. Underneath the translucent window, we have a fully painted and detailed lit up arc reactor. In the future, I would like to see a swap out just painted version to look like it's glowing. They have done that with their quarter scale Iron Man figures, so that we don't always have to rely on LEDs and button cell batteries. Even if this guy had an internal power supply or he was USB-C powered, LEDs do have a shelf life, so they would die eventually. You know what doesn't? Paint. Well, most of the time, unless it's their early rubbery Iron Man figures. But you get what I'm trying to say. Paint the arc reactors and give us that as a swap out option. Underneath the chest plate, there isn't any detail, but there is on the body itself. They've painted every single one of these mechanical armatures. I would be more impressed with this if it wasn't the same detail as what we saw with the 1.0. In fact, the chest plate is even the exact same. To prove it to you, here's the 1.0's chest plate. It pops in place, it sits in there snug and securely because this body is identical. It's just the paint that's different. Just to prove it to you if you don't believe me, this is the 1.0's chest plate. You can see how reflective this is, like car paint almost. The new one diffuses light and it's more satin. Just look at the reflections, it's a lot softer. We've got some blue LEDs underneath the chest area, and I tried to open up these panels. I could have sworn that they actuated. They don't. You're only going to be able to see those LEDs at very specific angles. The pinstriping for the ab section is another one of my favorites. This fine little detail work, super impressive. Coming down to the quite chonky legs, these panels are removable this time. They're die cast, so solid. These ones can come off as well. They're held in place with some pegs and magnets. Around the back, these plates can open up and there's some hidden detail on the underside. I did try and open up the flare canisters like the Mark VII. The Mark VI should technically have them in universe in the MCU. In figure format, he doesn't. These panels do not open. Don't try it. You're just going to scratch up the paint. The legs themselves, all the way down, are angular and geometric, and I'm here for it. This design for the ankles isn't the most practical because the plates stick out past the feet, and when you try and move them, stuff collides. We'll go into how that impacts articulation later in the video. I'm just now going over the mental checklist of everything we need to try out before we can move on. The battle damage parts, the endoskeleton pieces, and the weapons. Let's do the battle damage first, because it certainly isn't going to take us very long. It's literally just 2 pieces. The first of which is the chest plate. This I like because there's a lot of depth added. You can see straight through it thanks to the gash. There's some silver dry brushing over the top, and we've got some bullet holes. But the faceplate also adds some extra detail thanks to the gash on the left side of it as well. If there were more battle damage swap out pieces, and by all means they could have absolutely done that because these things come off, then maybe I would consider displaying him like this. As it stands, it's a no from me because everything else is clean on this figure except for the chest plate and the faceplate. There is some pitting and wear and tear here and there. I treat that more so as surface detail as compared to battle damage. That's what this stuff is. It's not like we're being forced to use them. If you don't like them, you can just keep them in the box. To install the shoulder-mounted dart launchers / missile pods, you take off those magnetic panels after you've moved the shoulder pads out of the way. Then the new ones just pop in place and they sit there very securely. This time, unlike the diecast Mark III 2.0, they've installed these in the correct orientation. The darts are facing forward. And don't forget, these panels flip up if you want to add even more weapons to the mix. Speaking of added weaponry, I loathe switching out these panels on his gauntlets. They're not held in place with magnets, they've used retention clips and rubber gaskets, and that just makes everything a lot more difficult. We've got 4 on this side and 4 on the other, making for 8 swap out panels in total. Not fun to install, so good to look at. The LEDs shining through underneath these expanded darts, and then we've got the rocket up on top and the lit up repulsor. I don't think this is something I covered in my original diecast Mark VI video, and I apologize for that. I like to believe the quality of my videos has improved significantly as compared to back in the day when I first reviewed the diecast Mark VI. This is the last weapon attachment we have to try out before we can move on to the endoskeleton parts and pop this guy in the gantry. To install the laser beam, you first have to swap out the hand with the laser projector on it. It's got a square peg and it slots in place very easily. Unlike the Mark VII version, which took me ages to install. The beam is very long, so make sure you have plenty of depth or width in the display if you plan on using it for your collection. It's time for the endoskeleton look. I've been really keen to try this out because this is the one big killer app or feature for the Mark VI Diecast 2.0. The original one didn't come with these pieces and most of them aren't cross-compatible. Step 1 is to remove the shoulder pads on both sides, and I like to angle this ball joint up so that I've got something to press against when I'm installing the replacement shoulder pads. For some reason, these are very difficult to install, so take your time with them, and maybe the part that the ball joint connects up to will loosen up over time. But fingers crossed, not too much. Now that we've done both of them, let's move on to the legs. These front panels I like to take off first, then you can remove the side ones. Both of them are made of die-cast metal. The only negative with doing the endoskeleton look is you are losing some weight off the figure because the pieces that you're removing, the leg panels and the shoulder pads, they're all die-cast. What you're gaining though is a bunch of extra detail we'll get stuck in a minute. If you're wondering how to install this back panel, don't, because it can't really be installed on the body. It doesn't connect up, there's no pins or magnets or anything. This is just meant to be displayed on the gantry, hovering behind the suit, making it look like it will become part of it. You could just leave it sitting there. Like I said, it's not properly connected, so if you bump this, it's going to fall off. The last step is to take off the chest plate, being mindful not to bend those pins, bring in the endoskeleton one, and push it in place. Now that we've got all of this stuff installed, visually speaking, it's a feast for the eyes. There is so much going on. We've got the armatures, and it's all painted in this shiny metallic gunmetal, and it's semi-see-through thanks to all the holes, so there is significantly more depth with these panels on. The issue that I have with this is we've removed a lot of die cast from the surface of this piece. It doesn't ruin the in-hand feel, but it does come across as more fragile now because these mini little armatures are all made of plastic. This will probably make more sense when he's standing in the gantry. Speaking of the gantry, this thing is a beast, man. It's absolutely enormous. It almost feels too big to be a real thing. I can't believe that they shipped this. They often make massive dioramas like this and use them at conventions to help market their figures. Most of the time, they don't end up making them or releasing them. This being the exception, I'm glad to see it, and I hope that in the future, we see more extravagant, ginormous dioramas like this. Now that we're up close, let's discuss the sculpt, paint, and the functionality. For each of the steps, they have added this almost gradiented look of airbrush shading around the edges, and some speckling of dirt and grime just to make them look a touch more gritty. You can pop the crotch grabber flight pole combo pretty much anywhere on the display base. It slots in and locks in place underneath the steps, and you can slide it left and right as well. We've not yet discussed the LEDs, but we will because they're one of the biggest reasons why this looks as good as it does. It seems as though they were thinking about doing a battery compartment, but then at the last second they changed their mind. They covered over the screw with a cap cover, and there's no spring inside, so don't remove that door. It's a non-functional battery compartment. Your only option is USB-C. And that's particularly strange because they don't include a USB-C cable, nor do they give you a wall adapter. I went with a battery bank because if you do go for a wall plug, you're going to have to be very specific about the wattage and voltage. Whereas with this, it decides what kind of wattage and voltage the gantry needs. I don't have to worry about that, it handles everything. Okay, now it's LED time. We've got multiple sets of LEDs on each step, and we've got LEDs on the side panels, plus some blue ones in the rings themselves. The blue LEDs are my favorite because they cast a blue glow on Tony, and that just pops against the metallic red for the armor. When you're assembling this thing, just check the instructions. I tried to shoot an assembly segment. It didn't go super well. Handling this thing on camera was a nightmare. Slot in the annular rings first, and they're numbered on the base of them so you know exactly where they're supposed to go. Then you can plug these pieces in. They all have these little connectors on the end of the posts that slot into the stairs, so power is transferred from the main base into the rings and these side portions. Every single one of these mechanical arms that you're supposed to have some of the armor plates on have the exact same port clip mechanism on the bottom. And the annular rings have multiple ports all the way up the top, so you can put these pretty much anywhere on the rings. If you want this one down the bottom, if you want it up the top, or at the back, or on one of the other rings, say you want to have every single mechanical arm on the same ring, that is doable. Once you connect this up, it is pretty secure, but when you rotate it, I would suggest holding it at the bottom so it doesn't disconnect on you. They have different points of articulation depending on which arm you're working with. This one has multiple hinges and a ball joint for the top piece. plus it swivels at the bottom. This is another one of the mechanical arms. The pistons aren't functional on any of them, unfortunately. Instead of the smaller clamp like what that one has, this has got a much bigger one. It's meant to be paired up with the back armor plate. When you pop this inside, it's perfectly contoured around the back of it, and there are some hinges and clamps at the top, so you lock it in there. You can shake this around, not that you would be able to once it's installed on the gantry, but installing it might mean there's some movement. That armor plate isn't going anywhere. We're moving on from the arms, I promise. This is the last one we're going to look at in detail, because it's the only one that looks quite like this, with the additional arm down the bottom. One of the others has this, but not the top portion that's meant to be used to hold the helmet. Whether you have the helmet open or closed, this thing does grab onto it pretty well. Each of these arms and the fingers, if you want to call them that, at the end are on hinges, and they're tight too. This is not floppy at all. It can rotate left and right because it's in a ball joint, so you can also tilt it left and right. For the second ring on both the left and right side, you can actuate this gold panel. There's a wash over the top, by the way, to make it look slightly weathered. And you can extend the top piece out on ratchet joints. Why they didn't do that for every single one of the rings with gold pieces, I'm not entirely sure. For some reason, this one doesn't ratchet up and down, it just articulates outwards like the one that we saw on the other side. With Tony now in the gantry, I've popped some of the armor plates we removed off him on the armatures, the back plate on one of the mechanical arms, and the helmet in the background as well. This is a perfect diorama. I don't often use the P word, I am using it today. This is how I have to have him displayed in my collection. And your eyes do not deceive you, I don't have him using the clear plastic crotch grabber, he's just standing there, no problem whatsoever. For a quick side-by-side comparison, on the left the 2.0 Mark VI, and on the right the 1.0. They're the same darn thing, same height, same sculpt. Yes, the new one has a more accurate paint job, and he has some new accessories, but you miss out on the open faceplate head sculpt. It's just Hot Toys splitting hairs at this point. Calling it a 2.0 was a bold move. I reckon it's a 1.5 at best. Next up, if it isn't Mr. Reindeer Games himself. This is technically the endgame version of Avengers 2012 Loki, but this works. If you want to have him displayed next to a Mark VI and you have the 2.0 on the way, this is what that looks like. Another Avengers Endgame, Avengers 2012 2.0 figure of sorts, this is Cap. He is shorter than Iron Man, just by a little. Going over articulation, starting off with his helmet. There is a ball joint at the base of the neck, but most of the range comes from a hinge and ball joint underneath the helmet itself. Combined, looking forward to there, looking up to there, plenty of range for a flight pose, swivel, and pivot side to side. The shoulder pads can move out the way, I suggest you do that to avoid paint rub. Then you can extend the arms as well. Going up to there, going forward and back, there's a butterfly joint at the shoulder that hinges up and down. Swivel at the bicep, double bend at the elbow going past 90, then for the wrist peg, it's a ball joint. The torso extends on multiple joints, crunching forward to there, going back to there, swivel, and pivot side to side. Before we move his legs, let's get these hip skirts out of the way. Then we can drop the legs down on these clicky ratchet joints. Going forward to there, but they also go out at the same time. Going out to there, swivel at the upper thigh. There's a ratcheted double bend at the knee, going past 90. The instructions do call out a drop-down foot. I've tried to pull this thing and it simply won't budge, so let's just ignore that. It is on a hinge, going forward and back. There's some rotation, but these armor pieces get in the way. Ankle tilt, and toe articulation. Moving on to the 3 cool and 3 annoying things. The first annoying thing is, unlike the Mark VI diecast 1.0, they decided not to include the Iron Man helmet with Tony Stark's face inside. Seeing as though with his early suits he did this pretty often, I would have liked to have seen this included. The second annoying thing is with the Gantry. Clearly at some point they were considering doing AA batteries as an optional power source. While I am going to use the USB-C port most of the time, options are never a bad thing, so in the future, batteries alongside USB-C cables, I don't mind that at all. The third annoying thing is, I love Iron Man as much as the next collector, but the 2.0 does feel a bit redundant. The mold is practically identical between the 1.0 and 2.0. The biggest difference being we're missing a head sculpt, the paint is now more satin, and we get a gantry this time. That's much bigger than what we got last time. The first cool thing is we finally have a Tony Stark head sculpt with moving eyes. It took them long enough, honestly. I don't know why we had to wait so freaking long to get this. While the sculpt itself is a bit controversial due to the smirk, I happen to really like it, and it's the moving eyes that set this over the top for me. The second cool thing is how the crotch grabber works with the gantry. You can literally put it anywhere. It slots underneath any one of these stairs. So if you want him all the way up the back, totally doable. If you want him all the way down the front, also a possibility. Or if you want to remove it entirely, you're going for full realism for a photo shoot, you can get that done. The third cool thing is if you own the Mark 6 1.0 and you had this in mind, the open faceplate helmet on the new body, well, this is practically the same as that original die-cast Mark 6, so this helmet is compatible with the new release. And the new head sculpt is compatible with the original. For a bonus cool thing, I was not expecting this. You can take the Mark 6's faceplate and carefully wedge it inside the openable helmet. There is a gap up the top, but if you wanted to have a fully detailed on the inside hollow Iron Man helmet for Tony to interact with, this is a really good option. Wrapping up on the Mark 6 Diecast 2.0. I don't want to sound overly sour about this release because there is a lot to like here. Iron Man is Hot Toys' bread and butter, we know this, it's well documented and established at this point. Most of us thought we were done with Marks 1 through 7 with the release of the last diecast redo, but nope, now we're on to 2.0s of all the diecast figures. This line is never going to be done, whether it's repaints with new accessories like this or open armor variants of suits we already have, they are going to milk this cow till we are sick of it. I'm already getting there. They will get to a point where they won't be able to give their Iron Man figures away. We are a while off that, so for now, they're going full steam ahead. If you have the 1.0, you don't care about the new sculpt and you couldn't possibly see a world where the new gantry fits in your display, this is a safe skip. If you've always loved this suit like me, but have been waiting for that movie-accurate satin finish, you like the sculpt and dig the gantry, then yes, this is a cop. It's as clear-cut as that for me. It is an improvement over the 1.0, but only just. The paint and the sculpt give this one the win for me personally. The gantry is an entirely separate beast, and I mean that literally. It's so big that most people will probably not have the room to display it. I will find a way. It is too dope not to use. With the original Mark 6, we had the miniaturized, quite small footprint gantry, and that was cool. It doesn't hold a candle to this new one. I've said it a bunch of times throughout the course of this video. It is the clearest and biggest, literally, selling point for this diecast Mark 6 2.0. So at the end of this, the gantry and the new accessories ended up being the biggest draw for me. We all collect differently though, so if you're head over heels for this figure and its new finish, you don't care about any of the other stuff, let all of that just be a bonus. Now, I got mine at a discount from Pop Collectibles. As always, do your own research, make sure you're comfortable before buying. I have popped a link to their site in the description below, along with the discount code Justin's Collection. for 5% off your order if you do decide to buy from them. While you're down there, why not hit that subscribe, bell notification icon, and join button if you like the sound of seeing your name in the end credits of my reviews. Like, comment, and subscribe. We'll catch you in the next video.